What is going on, everybody? We have made it to one of my favorite times of the year, draft grades season, baby. I'm especially excited for all of those incoming comments telling me just how useless draft grades are. Look, I know one thing. I didn't spend the last 4 months grinding college tape to not tell you guys how I think every team found value in this weekend's NFL draft, and how I see all of these players fitting in with their new teams. So today, I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on every single pick from the NFC East, including any undrafted free agent steals that stood out to me as well. Before we do get started though, guys, if you could do me a huge favor, take just a second to hit that like button down below. I know it sounds silly, but especially in a video like this, it does such a good job telling YouTube to suggest this video out to other NFL sickos just like you guys. So I really appreciate if you could take just a second to hit that down below. And of course, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss all 8 of my divisional draft grades videos. But let's go ahead and get started with the Washington Commanders. Obviously not a ton of picks. They've been busy trading for veterans like Marshawn Lattimore, Deebo Samuel, and the big one, Laramie Tunsil. But I gotta say, I like what they did with the picks that they did have, and that started with the 29th pick where they get a hopeful franchise tackle in Josh Conerly Jr. Really exactly the range of the draft I envisioned him going, kind of late first, early second, as someone that has all of the athletic levers to be a franchise tackle and good technique and good production at Oregon in a kind of spread forward system that did get rid of the ball a little bit quickly to protect him a lot of the times from some of his weakness that is his anchor and his play strength. You do want to see him continue to bulk up, but still very young. You know who he reminds me a lot of is Roger Rosengarten, who came out of Washington last year. Conerly, very similar tape in my opinion with that athletic background and some of the play strength concerns, but Conerly's even a year younger. So I think Washington would absolutely take some of that if he was something like what Roger Rosengarten was for the Ravens last year. This was an A-graded pick for me. Nothing I could critique or say differently about this selection. And then I think they did even better getting Trey Amos at the end of the second round. If you're going to trade away a bunch of picks, why not recoup a lot of that value by taking who was, in my opinion, every bit someone that could have gone in the first round at the ass end of the second round in Trey Amos, a remarkably high floor cornerback, and in a class that all of these top corners had serious injury concerns. I was very surprised that Amos slipped through the cracks here. Not the most athletic guy, but he has plenty of athleticism with 4.4 speed and good size. I do think his feet are a little bit stiffer, and it reduces his margin for error. And, if he takes a false step and the timing's right from the offense, his recovery in a short area is not going to be phenomenal. But for the most part, man, this is a bet on just incredible cornerback tape, someone that can go man coverage, play physical, ride in a guy's hip pocket, use his size to his advantage, attack the football, and play physical at the catch point, and all of that good stuff you look for in a press man corner. But I think his off-zone tape was even better. The way he can anticipate throws, the way he reacts to the footwork of wide receivers to break down and squeeze space from off coverage, it's really, really special. I think he could do really everything with Trey Amos. Maybe never going to be, a perennial Pro Bowl type of guy, but I compared him to James Bradbury. I think he can be a really high-end number 2 and a low-end number 1 type of guy for a long time. And to get him in a cornerback room that has a lot of questions right now, it really does. Just one of my favorite picks of the entire draft here. And then you get to day 3, some nice picks here. They take Jalen Lane in the 4th round, right around where I had him going, a potential vertical threat to plug into this offense that's got Deebo and it's got, obviously, Terry McLaurin with everything he can do. I don't know how much we see from Jalen Lane right away. Terry McLaurin is quietly 30 years old. I'm not projecting regression or anything like that for Terry, but I would say Lane, you obviously got to be careful when you say stuff like this, but I would say there are parallels to who Lane is coming out to what Terry McLaurin was coming out, who went third round. McLaurin wasn't a particularly productive player at Ohio State, just didn't get the down the field volume targets that we now know he should have been getting more of. The same applies to Jalen Lane, who does get open, does have awesome speed. His hands aren't bad considering he's one of these vertical threats that can get these high difficulty targets down the field. So definitely a good pick. I don't know how much we see of him in year one, but a good value, and down the road could carve out a starting role for them. Then they go with the athletic Kane Medrano out of UCLA. A sixth-year senior who played at 220 pounds and has a lot of deficiencies in his game, hence why he goes in the 6th round. But, you're running that 4-4. Go pair him with a great coach in Dan Quinn and company in Washington, and see what happens next in the 6th round. It's hard to really fault it. But then one of my favorite steals of late day 3, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, the running back out of Arizona by way of New Mexico State. It's hard to even say he was out of Arizona because he played about 2 games there before the NCAA, the assholes that they are, came in and said, actually, you don't have eligibility. You can't play. Merritt has to sit out, declare for the draft. He goes to the Shrine Bowl and wins Offensive Player of the Week, but he's got real traits. If he was able to play, I imagine he would have, I think, got himself into the kind of top 10 running back conversations in this draft class, in, considering as well how good of a running back class this is. Even then, he's not the biggest guy, but he is strong. He's a filled out, about 5'10", 206, but just violent cuts out in space, really has a lot of juice. In an offense like this that allows their backs to get into space, I don't know if he's going to get out there right away, but I think he has legitimate 3-down back potential if he can clean up some of the pass pro stuff. Did some good stuff catching the ball down the field as well. So there's a lot of potential here for a 7th round pick. Definitely someone that for your dynasty drafts and stuff, definitely get him on your radar. Put him on your taxi squads and stuff. This is an opportunity with Eckler nearing the end of his career, let's be honest. And Brian Robinson, who's dealt with injuries, nearing the end of his contract. If they like what they see there, he might start to get more and more opportunities, and the talent is absolutely there. And a huge steal, damn near close to Mr. Irrelevant. So that rounds out a really nice draft for the Washington Commanders. No undrafted free agents stood out to me, but gotta give this an A grade for the Commanders. Less picks, but on a pick-by-pick basis, I think they knocked it out the park, and I think they had to do that considering they've given away so many picks. Next up, we have the Dallas Cowboys, who kicked things off in the 1st round, doing what they do, taking a Tyler along the offensive line. That is 3 out of 4 years they have done that in the 1st round. They are hoping they get more of the early returns that they got from Tyler Smith than so much on the Tyler Guyton pick. But as far as taking Booker here with the 12th pick, I don't mind it, man. Is it a little bit earlier than I might have taken him? Sure, he's going to get the B grade there, but it's very easy to see how he fits in here, just plugging in right at right guard to replace Zach Martin. And Booker, I've said this before, but I still liked him as a late 1st, early 2nd round guy. I think he got just way too much hate from the draft Twitter world because he isn't an athlete, and with so many fans being fans of teams that run wide zone systems that require athleticism from their offensive linemen to reach block and get on the move as a puller, a lot of fans are going to look at Tyler Booker and say, yeah, for my team, he kind of stinks. And for a lot of teams, they certainly wouldn't have had a 1st round grade on Tyler Booker. But that, I think, can get confused with what he means for the right system fit. And for the Dallas Cowboys, we know with Schottenheimer here and really who the Cowboys have been as an identity for a long time, they focus on being a north and south run game. And Tyler Booker blocking in that system is an absolute natural, just rep after rep, awesome tape in the run game, a sticky blocker with his long arms, his strong hands, and just one of the more aware blockers I've seen in terms of not letting defenders cross his face, knowing exactly how to peel off of those combo blocks and climb up to the next level. Just such a natural, such great blocker awareness. And that shows in his blitz pickup and his technique as a pass blocker too, where he's going to be able to keep Dak upright. So a really good pick in my opinion. Happy to see Tyler Booker go to a good spot there. But then you get to the middle of the second round, and they're able to land Donovan Ezuraku, the edge rusher out of Boston College. Based on the sort of consensus rankings, this is going to be seen as a colossal steal. Not to, celebrate a guy falling or anything like that, but that was a win for my own draft analysis. I spent a lot of time kind of pushing back on the idea that Ezuraku was kind of worth a top 20 pick or so. I just definitely view him as a number 2 type of edge rusher in the league because he's a guy that wins a lot with speed and bend but doesn't have great speed, and he can win with power, but I don't project him at his size with his power profile to be a dominant power rusher in the league. My pro comp on him, though, was Harold Landry, who's been a really nice number 2 level edge rusher out of Boston College, who went right around this territory with the 12th pick in whatever year that draft was for the Titans. So just picture what Harold Landry's been. I think you're getting a very similar player here. It's not a eye-to-eye comparison, but and you don't want to just scout the helmet, but I do think it applies here. And for the Cowboys, that makes a lot of sense for where that room is at. Just in general, the idea of getting a Robin to Micah Parsons, where Ezuraku really can thrive as a number 2 and potentially one of the best number 2s in the league. And they have other guys, too, that can kind of play. And, I think Ezuraku can defend the run, but he is a smaller guy. He's going to have to prove that he can do it in the NFL. They drafted Marshawn Kneeland in the second round last year, too. I think this allows you to get the best version of Marshawn Kneeland as well, where, he can play a lot more on earlier downs, do a lot of the heavy lifting with the run defense. You can maybe, rotate Ezuraku and Parsons to keep them fresh a little bit extra for pass rush downs, and then you can also allow Kneeland to do some stuff from the inside as well next to Osa in there. So that trio really, really works for me. Seems like Sam Williams probably on the out coming off the injury there, I think heading into the last year of his deal. I wonder if someone might give a call about Sam Williams after this draft pick, but excellent value in my opinion. Definitely too good a value, I think, for Dallas to pass up, even if it wasn't the biggest need for them. My only kind of just comment, and it's not even a criticism as we kind of get further and further in this Cowboys draft, I do look back on this class, and we're obviously about to rave about Siobhan Ravel. You can all see that pretty looking purple A+, and I'm not about to fault them for taking him there. But there is a lack of playmaking juice getting brought to this team that I think was ultimately their biggest need heading into the draft, whether it was a real running back to help the run game or a wide receiver to take some pressure off of CeeDee Lamb and help Dak. There is a lack of that in this draft class that I do wish they would have gone that route somewhere. But again, back to the Siobhan Ravel pick in the third round, can't fault them for taking a guy that if he went at the back end of the first round, I wouldn't have blinked. I mean, incredible talent, great speed, remarkable ball skills, a tough dude that had really good tape at ECU, missed that final year that, man, if he didn't have that ACL injury and had a great year and was able to go to the Senior Bowl and test, show off a 40 time that I think we can speculate would have been at least in the 4.3s, if not in the 4.2s, he very well might have been not just a first rounder, but something similar to like what happened with Quinyon Mitchell last year. Obviously his year goes in the opposite direction here, but I think Dallas betting on what he looked like in his 4 games or whatever it was, and that was a long time ago, that he'll have almost a full year to recover from the ACL, was very surprised that he fell as far as he did, frankly. And Dallas has obviously had success just kind of following their board, not passing up on value. I think it's a perfectly good way to draft. Even if you're going to be left here saying, man, I would have loved to get a wide receiver or running back with one of these picks, there's going to be a point in time where they're very happy to have Siobhan Ravel, in my opinion, and this is a nice, cozy spot because he doesn't need to be available to play right away. You do have Deron Bland and Trayvon Diggs. I think they're looking down the barrel of the gun a little bit and know that the Micah Parsons contract is coming, obviously, but another big one is going to be that Deron Bland contract, which could happen before this season starts. I don't think they really want to pay both Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland, so this gives them an out to maybe just let those guys play out the year, and whoever has a better year, you go with that guy. I don't know. I mean, Trayvon Diggs, I think, is already like 28 years old, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is Diggs' last year in Dallas. He just hasn't quite been the same guy since they paid him anyway. So I do like that, and he has superstar potential behind what is now going to be really nasty pass rush, even more nasty with Ezuraku. So a bunch of good players in the first 3 picks. 3 guys that I think, if they went at some point in the first round, all 3 of those guys, I would have been completely, would have been completely reasonable picks, if you know what I'm saying. But I do think where they could have adjusted here is on day 3. If they follow their board on day 1, day 2, I would have liked to see them with 6 picks here be a little bit more aggressive to get those 2 key needs filled at a pair of positions, being wide receiver and running back, that are deeper groups. We see all the time starting caliber players at those position groups fall into the 4th and 5th round, and they really didn't address that. And obviously they take Jaden Blue here with the 12th pick in the 5th round. That's fine. He's a receiving back that had really hard to watch running back tape, just completely all over the place with his vision. He's a smaller back. He doesn't have a lot of power. He absolutely projects as a kind of scat back type, playmaker type with a lot of speed, good route runner. He's good in that role. And I don't have an issue with where they took him or anything like that, but man, we're still talking about them heading into next year with Miles Sanders and the shell of Javonte Williams. You had guys like Devin Neal, Damian Martinez, among some other names in this remarkable running back class. Hell, a Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt that we talked about going in the 7th round for Washington. I'm not saying it had to be this Jaden Blue pick right here that they should have gone with one of those backs, but I am saying with the 16th pick here in the 5th round, 4 picks later, I would have done both of those backs right there. Get Devin Neal, bring him right down the road from Kansas. Get Damian Martinez, who goes to Seattle in the 7th round. I don't know if there was something going on there for why he fell, but man, you put either of those backs in Dallas's backfield, day 1 starter in my opinion, and would have really sent home the idea that they're going best player available on day 1 and day 2, and then they're competent to kind of fill the last remaining needs with value that's starting to fall into day 3. Instead, they go with the very raw, slow, undersized 21-year-old linebacker that many people thought should have gone back to school in Shamar James out of Florida. So again, to not go Devin Neal there, big mistake in my opinion. He ends up going, I think about 15, 20 picks later to New Orleans. Just an oversight, in my opinion, on Dallas's draft that really could have sent this thing home. But we'll see. Shamar James stylistically is very DeMarvion Overshone, where he just flies to the ball. He's an intense player. He loves to hit, but he doesn't have the speed of a guy like Overshone, and certainly didn't have the college tape either. So it was early, and you could have done the back or get a wide receiver in this class that had some potential. Then you fast forward to the end of the 6th round. Okay, a Johnny Cornelius. Again, there were some of those backs still sitting around. He could have gone with the Damian Martinez there. At that point just continues to apply, in my opinion. I hate to just beat a dead horse, but I really do believe Dallas is going to regret not getting an actual running back out of this supremely talented running back draft. Cornelius, to me, I watched a little bit of him when I did Josh Connerly. Looked very much an average kind of, high floor, low ceiling type of backup tackle. I didn't ultimately write him up and slap a final grade on it, but this is kind of where he was expected to go. So backup tackle in the 6th round, it's fine in a vacuum. The first pick in the 7th round, I do like getting Jay Toya here, nose tackle out of UCLA. I thought he would go a little bit earlier just because of his size and the fact that he did get kind of incrementally every single year after he had kind of an immature moment in his freshman year. Dane Brugler wrote about that in the Beast draft guide, that he kind of publicly apologized and seems to be, on a good trajectory. Not a bad kid, just had a weird moment in his youth. But yeah, I think he could be every bit a 2-gapping early down nose tackle with a little bit more development. And then they take a running back finally. Okay, Phil Moff out of Clemson. Good production at Clemson, but just not an athlete. Some Cowboys fans might sit here and say, you idiot, we did take that running back late. I mean, late. Very, very late. I'm familiar with Phil Moff. Wasn't really sure if he was going to get drafted or not, but he comes off the board here. I don't see him as a guy that's going to push players like Sanders and even Javonte Williams in the way that I would have said about guys like Devin Neal or Damian Martinez that would have been available for you. And then they take Tommy Akingbissote out of Maryland, another guy that I did kind of watch side by side when I watched Jordan Phillips, his teammate on that defensive line. More of an undersized athlete, developmental type, kind of in the Osa Odigizua world of athletic three techniques. So, the 31st pick, we'll see if he makes the team, but a lot of development needed there with him. Didn't see anybody that stood out to me on their undrafted free agent list either. But I do really like the Cowboys draft. I'm giving it an A- grade here. The players they walked out of the first 3 rounds with, it's very, very hard to criticize that. But I am critical. I don't think it would have been that hard for them to get a playmaking wide receiver and a good running back with those picks, whether you're trading them or using one of those picks. I think it could have been done, and I do think they dropped the ball there, and I'm going to be a little bit critical because there's definitely room for those types of players to not just make this team, but make a potential impact for them. But still an A-, a very good, well-graded draft for the Dallas Cowboys. Then we have the Philadelphia Eagles. As far as Howie Roseman drafts go, this was not a bad draft by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like a lot of times we have these draft grades videos and it's like, what the hell? How did the Eagles get all of these players? There weren't necessarily any picks that like punched me in the face that was like, oh my God, the Eagles did it again. The closest to that would be their first round pick with Jahad Campbell, but there's been reports for multiple weeks now that shoulder injury could cause him to fall. He is a linebacker prospect, and as good of a linebacker prospect as he is, I was totally in on him as a first round grade. It wasn't a surprise that he did fall because he might not be available out the gate, and shoulder injuries for a guy that hits this hard could be a complication down the stretch. So I'm just saying that's why he was available. But in terms of who the player is, who the prospect is, this is absolutely an A-graded pick to get him with the 31st pick in the first round. My pro comp on him, ironically, was Zach Bond, someone that at his best can turn into a just dominant first-team All-Pro level linebacker. I'm also curious if they mess around with him as an edge potentially, but I don't know. I think they probably see him as a linebacker, I would think, and putting him next to Zach Bond and just having 2 of those guys. But yeah, that pick very much speaks for itself. I don't know that he's going to be a dominant rookie. It's certainly possible. Sometimes these linebackers surprise, but with Campbell, just like any young linebacker, especially one like him that was used kind of all over the defense and a lot as a blitzer, look, there are a lot of areas of his game in terms of run diagnostics and taking on blocks and doing the right things in zone coverage and using his eyes a lot better. There's still a lot of growth for him to accomplish before he can reach that Zach Bond comp. But if he does, the upside is just going to be, just trying to impact the Eagles defense in the middle of the field there is going to be a real problem if things come along. Then they go Andrew Makuba at the end of the second round. I ended up giving this an A. I went back and forth between a B and an A, and I really just sat there and debated, like, is this enough for me to criticize them for not going with Kevin Winston Jr. out of the state of Pennsylvania, who goes not long after this to the Titans, or Xavier Watts, who I did have both those safeties ranked over Andrew Makuba? I really just kind of sat there and said, like, is this worth criticizing, not going with those safeties over a player that I do still really like in Andrew Makuba, who did have him as a second to a third round grade? And my final answer to that was no, because if I had to project one of those guys as a high upside safety in a Vic Fangio split safety defense, I think Andrew Makuba would certainly fit the mold as an answer to that question. I still really love Xavier Watts, but I get why they went Makuba, because just playing quarters, cracking down on receivers over the middle of the field, jumping routes from quarters, somebody can rotate into single high. He's not so abysmal as a tackler, and he plays physical that if you do rotate him down and try to ask him to fill the run a little bit more urgently, he can survive doing it. You just don't want him to do it consistently. I definitely projected him to go to a Fangio-style system where pre-snap they're going to have these two safeties showing, quarters pretty much pre-snap every single play, and then they'll rotate into kind of everything else we described there. But definitely with Makuba, with the lack of size, I projected him to go into that system, not just because I think he's better in those quarter-style coverages, but because I don't want him around the box too much. Perfect landing spot. I think him and Sidney Brown are going to have a hell of a competition here this year, and they should be pretty damn good at that safety position. And if Makuba doesn't win that job, I think you can use him in dime packages, at least as a rookie, to give him a role where he can just lurk and read the quarterback's eyes and still might get you some picks. And, some of that ball hawking ability that they lost in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, you're able to make it back here with Andrew Makuba for sure. Not dissimilar players, frankly, Makuba and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. But they did not have a third-round pick. I believe that was the Jahan Dotson trade, right? Hey, the man had a good Super Bowl. No one's going to be complaining about that. But you do go to day 3. They take Ty Robinson at the top of the 4th round. This was where I was like, oh, God, the Eagles have an early 4th-round pick. They're going to grab David Walker or Alec Iomanner or whoever the league kind of lets sneak through the cracks into the 4th round. And no, they take an early day 3 prospect in Ty Robinson, who I like. I think is a solid pick as a hybrid defensive end that can do a little bit of everything for them, play a little 3-4 end, a little heavy-handed edge work if they want. A lot of developmental potential for him. I don't think he's going to be too much of an impactful player out the gate, but maybe they can get a little bit more out of him. He's a fun player to watch. He's really tall. He's got really good traits, and he plays his ass off. It's just like he's still, especially from a pass rushing perspective, learning how to put things together. And even as a run defender, like his pads could get high. He could get driven off the ball a good bit. But they got good coaching there, and maybe in a year he turns into an impactful player for them as kind of a hybrid defensive end type. And then they take Mac Williams in the 5th round there. I didn't get to Mac Williams, was someone that was on my radar. Had a good pro day and all that good stuff. Kind of your traits-based developmental corner that will be CB5 in that room, and they'll see what they can get there while he theoretically contributes on special teams. I did really like the 25th pick in the 5th round here, Smile Mondin Jr. out of Georgia. Howie had to get at least somebody out of Georgia in this draft, and I think he got arguably the best day 3 Georgia defender, just kind of thinking off the top of my head, in Mondin. Kind of like take everything we said about Jahad Campbell and just turn down the dials about 20%. Super athletic dude. I think ran good 4.5 something 40, but he played kind of a star linebacker role in Georgia's defense where he was playing the wing as a weak side backer, slot corner, strong safety, kind of hybrid player. So really not just a lighter player, but lacks a lot of experience kind of going through his read keys as a middle linebacker and taking on blocks. And similar with Jahad Campbell, a guy that has had a lot of durability concerns. Not that Campbell's had durability concerns, but he enters the league with them with that shoulder. But just a fun player to get in the room there. With Nakobe Dean, with Jahad Campbell, with Zach Bond, obviously, and just the perfect kind of day 3 pick because he's going to fly around and hit and contribute on special teams for you while you hope to develop him. Then they go Drew Kendall, athletic offensive lineman out of Boston College. Get him in the Jeff Stoutland pipeline there. Hard to argue with that. They definitely have room on the interior. Kendall can be a backup center for you in that athletic mold. If anything were to happen to Cam Jurgens, you have a similar kind of mold there. But I think Kendall has the size to play guard as well. If he really looks good and you don't like what you're getting there at right guard. So a nice pick. I just didn't get to his tape, but everything kind of checks out there as a solid pick. And then they take Kyle McCord in the 6th round, and my analysis on this is great pick by the Eagles, remarkable value, and we know quarterbacks carry so much value. I had a 3rd round grade on Kyle McCord. He starts to slip through the cracks, and for the Eagles, they just say, well, we got to take this because there's too much value on the board here. Even if he doesn't make any sense for the Philadelphia Eagles right now, which he really doesn't. I was bummed, though, for Kyle McCord. I feel like he's just kind of gotten screwed, man. The NCAA tells him he can't have a 5th year of eligibility. He falls to the 6th round of the draft. when I think he had better tape than that. And then he goes to a spot where he's locked in as a QB3, at least for the next 2 years, because the Eagles just literally did this with Tanner McKee in the 6th round a couple years ago, and he looked really good at the end of the season. So it's like you kind of need a couple of events to happen before Kyle McCord even sees the field. Knock on wood that this never happens, as I would always say in these situations, but like if something happens to Hurts, McCord would then become QB2, and then you would need either McKee to then get hurt or for McKee to really struggle to the point that they go to McCord. Now, if McCord ever got on the field in this juggernaut offense, I think he would play damn well, and I would be really excited to see what he can do, just as we saw with Tanner McKee at the end of the year. So at least in that regard for Kyle McCord, it's a good landing spot, but, this isn't him going to the Browns where he's going to get a chance to compete, or the Saints who took Tyler Shook where he's going to have a chance to start, or even the Steelers where you're going to sit behind Rodgers for a year. No, he goes to a spot where, he is going to have to be very patient and just prepare for his opportunity. But obviously from a value perspective, the player is very fun. You guys can go back to my QB rankings video where I talked a lot about McCord and someone that I was really bummed didn't get to go back to school, because I think he had a chance to be the next sort of Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, Cam Ward, these day 3 QB prospects that have a great final year and get themselves into the first round one way or another. So, yeah, will be an interesting player to monitor with this landing spot. But from the Eagles' perspective, a lot of value there. Someone that they could potentially flip for a high pick down the road, or maybe they flip McKee for a high pick and then go with McCord or something like that. This is kind of how the Eagles operate, of course, valuing that backup QB spot, having won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles. But then they take another developmental offensive lineman in Miles Hinton out of Michigan. I had a 5th round grade on him. They get him here in the 6th. I think it's a good pick. Very much in that Mekhi Becton build, 6'6", 340 pounds. Wouldn't be stunned, man. Getting him with Jeff Stoutland, moving inside, a guy that played tackle. I think it's a really good pick for the Eagles, even if he was certainly clunky as a tackle and not the best prospect, but I think could even be a better pro than he was at Michigan. And then they just do our classic double dip strategy with someone I had ranked even higher, Cameron Williams. I was stunned that Cam Williams declared. He's 21 years old. His tape at Texas last year was hard to watch, frankly. But he has ridiculous length, ridiculous hands. He's got 11 and over a half-inch hands. His hands are the size of a damn ruler. That's absurd. So the tools with him, and he's a traits-based developmental prospect that wasn't able to show his traits and didn't work out. So that's probably why he falls here. But I've been wanting the Eagles to get a high upside traits-based, mentee basically to Lane Johnson, getting to work with Jeff Stoutland. Cam Williams in the 6th round is a dream for the Eagles, at least in terms of the value of the dart throw that you get there. So that's a great pick. And then they're able to add a little bit of depth to their edge group with Antoine Powell-Ryland. Kind of a one-dimensional player. He's a little bit lighter. He doesn't really defend the run, but he does have some speed to power and a bull rush. Maybe he can develop a little bit more than that, but just, kind of filling out the back end of that deep edge group after you did lose some pieces there. I think that's, kind of the last roster spot that they saw room for, and were able to tap into a deep edge class with a good value there at the end of the 6th round on Powell-Ryland. And then they even had some undrafted free agent pickups that I liked. They get Holland Pierce, just him and Miles Hinton I saw as basically the same prospect, just 2 massive tackle prospects that probably need to kick into guard to a team that's willing to work with a 6'7" guard. Here you go. Mekhi Becton leaves. You insert those 2 guys and let them compete. And then Maxon Hook as well might make this team as safety depth. He tested really well. The tape was underwhelming to me, but I definitely thought he would get drafted based on his measurables, as we saw so many athletic DBs go on day 3 of the draft, and he fell through. So for the Eagles, I gave them an A- grade. I think their process was really good. when I really sat back and looked at this and asked, is this an A draft or an A- draft? Stacking it up against the other A drafts that we've seen, I didn't quite feel that this was the impactful draft that some of those A drafts were. Maybe it's a little bit of the, fourth, fifth round, leaving a little bit to be desired there. Maybe it's, Makuba is more of a A- pick than a true A pick, but I'm not doing minuses and pluses for this exercise and how I have my criteria. But we're splitting hairs here. It was good process draft. Howie Roseman's just really, really freaking good at this. So nothing new there for Philadelphia. But then we finish up with the New York Giants. And this is a fascinating one because we all knew heading into the draft, this is a team that was going to have to do something a little bit desperate to get their quarterback. And if you told me, the day of the draft, they're going to trade up, a decent amount of picks to come up, get Jackson Dart at the end of the first round, I would have said, yeah, I mean, they backed themselves into a corner. I understand that they're going to do that and why they need to do that. I don't love it, but I understand it based on where they've positioned themselves. But knowing that kind of had to happen, I think the rest of this draft was phenomenal. Like, pick by pick, at least with their first 3 picks outside of Jackson Dart, just insane picks for what the Giants could have used and from a value perspective. So let's break it down. I mean, you get Abdul Carter with the 3rd pick. We've already had a lot of analysis about this pick from all these mock drafts, but just a definition of a blue chip edge rush prospect that could be one of those dudes, right? One of those game-wrecking, game-changing players that opposing offenses have to circle on their game plan. And now, yeah, you had a deep edge group, but now you have hopefully a guy that can reach a level that, well, offenses can't really double him and Kayvon Thibodeau. And if they do, your secondary is going to be very thankful because you're going to have a lot of extra blockers staying in, and you're only going to be covering 3.5 wide receivers with guys chip blocking half the time. So obviously I'm very proud of them for playing the board and take the elite talent at the top of the draft in Abdul Carter, take him despite the fact that you have, multiple starting caliber edge rushers on your team already, and finesse the rest of the situation to try to get a quarterback that's not so much of a reach with the 3rd overall pick. And I think knowing that they put themselves in a situation where they had to get a young quarterback, I think this was played out perfectly. And I'm actually just going to jump right to the Darius Alexander pick, and then we'll talk a little bit about Jackson Dart, because to then reinforce the Abdul Carter pick, in one of my mock drafts, just as a thought experiment, not saying it was something that I think they would or should do, but I had considered them going Mason Graham, who obviously goes with the 5th pick. It wasn't absurd to suggest that. But the reason I said that is because you did have those edge rushers, but for years, they've been looking for, we got that inside look at their Hard Knocks a couple years ago where they were talking about, we would love to get a running mate next to Dexter Lawrence that can take advantage of the fact that your 3 technique is getting single teamed. It's just going to happen. Teams cannot leave Dexter Lawrence one-on-one. He will murder you if you do that. So, that free agency, they were talking about some guys they wanted to sign. They kind of struck out, and they didn't end up getting that guy last year. But Darius Alexander has a chance in this situation to come in immediately as a refined 25-year-old prospect with a lot of production and athletic traits and skill on the table to come in and be, a defensive rookie of the year candidate. I would go that far with this. Someone asked me that question in the live stream, and we were going through it, and it's well, there's not really a clear guy to be that guy. You're obviously going to have Carter and Mason Graham at the top of that list, but dude, given Darius Alexander's age and the opportunity where he really is just going to be able to line up and eat one-on-one all day long, this has a chance to be one of the steals of the entire draft, and certainly a chance to round this out with everything we said about Abdul Carter as the best defensive line in all of football. And if you have the best defensive line in football, it is damn near impossible to be a bad team. I will say that. And definitely puts a lot of pressure on Shane Bowen to get things cooking with this defense, especially after they spent some money in the secondary too. But Jesus, man, this D-line just makes complete and total sense. And, Thibodeau could be kind of a wild card rusher on this defense if they talk to Thibodeau and he's cool playing with this team and everything works out there. And he could have a nice role, kind of getting freed up even more, coming in fresh and just teeing off after the quarterback. So just a remarkable pair of picks to go with those two players. And I could not applaud them more. I think it's just that combination of picks is one of the most favorite things that a team was able to pull off this draft weekend. But yeah, let's talk about Jackson Dart. Obviously, they were in a tough situation, and it kind of makes the conversation unique because it's easy for me to sit here on YouTube and say, well, yeah, you could have probably just waited for Jackson Dart to get to you, and if not, there was other guys I liked. You could have just bit the bullet on Shedeur. You could have gone with Tyler Shook. Obviously, Dart was their guy. That cluster of guys, they were all very similar in my mind. I don't think it's crazy that Dart would go at the end of the first round. There's some upside for him to be a starting quarterback in the league. He's got a good arm. I don't think he has a great arm. He is athletic. He's a really good scrambler. What does bother me about Jackson Dart is the same thing that just pisses me off to no end about Derek Carr and some other quarterbacks in the league, where his pocket presence is just so abysmal. The way he is kind of walks into sacks and bails out of clean pockets. He just leaves a lot of meat on the bones of plays. And that's just a trait that very rarely develops in players. That to me is a spatial awareness aspect of the quarterback position, and he's lacking that. But there are traits there to sit him behind Russ and maybe get a Derek Carr, in his prime level start or something like that. Maybe everything comes together and from a mental perspective, he really impresses you with his work ethic, and he's something like a Dak Prescott. Like, that's possible with Jackson Dart. It's just not likely, in my opinion, but possible with a good quarterback coach like Brian Daboll. But, they give up their third-round pick this year, pick 99, and their third-round pick next year to move up from the 34th pick in the draft to climb up. I also understand you want to get that fifth-year option as well, that extra year of cheap control. So, at the end of the day, a C grade is just what felt right to me. I could see this working out, and if he turns into a starting caliber quarterback and with Brian Daboll and an elite defense and Malik Neighbors, and maybe continue to build up the aspects of that offense as well, give him a really good surrounding cast on a rookie quarterback contract, this could go in a good direction. I also could see him just being a bust and not being very good. So a C grade just really felt fitting for me on the Jackson Dart pick, and now we just kind of leave that there and see where this one goes. And I feel like that's pretty much everyone's opinion on this, frankly. So I don't feel like I'm going out on a limb to have some hot take there or anything like that. I think that's most people's feelings on this situation. But then you go fast forward to day 3, the third pick in the 4th round. Cam Scatterbo comes off the board. Dude, I love this for the Giants, man. Tyrone Tracy came in as a 5th-round running back last year and provided some juice, a former wide receiver. You got to see him clean up the hands and the fumbling issues, but, you're excited about what he can be. But, thinking of Tyrone Tracy as a full 3-down back for you was always still a bit of a high bar for a guy like that to clear. I think Cam Scatterbo is the perfect pairing with him. And I really trust Brian Daboll to get these guys out there in the right down and distance situations with the right play dialed up to get the most out of these two very different skill sets with your speedy kind of, I'll just say that, your kind of athletic Tyrone Tracy and your smashing Tasmanian Sun Devil is the nickname I'm trying to get on Cam Scatterbo, coming from the Arizona State Sun Devils. But he really does play like he's the Tasmanian Devil, where he gets into a cloud of dust and he will drag you through the mud and somehow end up with 4 yards on even a poorly blocked run. But he's not just tough, and you love that about him. He seeks out contact. He's such a violent runner, but he does not get enough credit for his quick feet and the way that he's able to change lanes inside the tackles and make you miss. And not even just that, he does have great contact balance, but he's so good at tapping into those quick feet and his awareness at the position where he can sense pursuit angles, and he does the same exact thing Ashton Ginty does, where right before you're lunging after him to tackle him, he'll have a very subtle sidestep and make sure you're not hitting all of him. You're just hitting a left hip or a right quad or whatever it is. And it just pairs so nicely with his contact balance and his agility to do what he did in college, which is be the third all-time broken tackles getter per PFF since they've been charting missed tackles forced. I want to say it was just Bijan and Ashton Ginty that had a season recording more missed tackles forced than Scatabo did last season. So I had a second-round grade on Scatabo. I think a lot of worse running backs went before him, and what a great fit where if you do want a little bit more juice in there, you have Tyrone Tracy. But I think Scatabo, frankly, has a chance of just kind of overtaking that backfield and making Tracy kind of a true scat back, which I think is totally fine. I don't think Tracy blew me away last year, even though you saw some good stuff. And I could see Scatabo, being one of these kind of star running backs in the NFL. I really think the world of him as a player, and this was a tremendous steal 2 rounds later than I thought he would go. So just really fun to get some added talent anywhere in that offense, whether it was going to be in the ground game or on the offensive line or in the receiving room, to get that on top of forcing your quarterback pick and getting his 2 D linemen. It's just an absolute slam dunk. And then they take Marcus Bowe out of Purdue in the 5th round. This was a win for my channel. I had him as a 5th round guy, talked about him in the offensive line rankings where I just could not for the life of me understand the consensus day 2 rankings on Marcus and Bowe. Just no play strength to speak of. I thought his tape at tackle was highly concerning. I think he's a developmental center prospect, maybe a guard. But for a 5th round pick now, for a guy that is tremendously athletic, this is where I can get behind. Obviously, I had a 5th round grade on him. So to me, some people might call this a huge steal based on the consensus. Personally, going off of how I saw these guys, it was more of just, this is where he's supposed to go. He's a developmental day 3 lineman, and hopefully he can turn into something for him. He's got to bulk up and improve his technique across the board. If he can, there is a lot of upside there for him. Then you have Thomas Fidone, the 2nd out of Nebraska. Can we get Tommy Cutlets throwing passes to Thomas Fidone, please? Very unique prospect. Didn't really know what to do with him. I've never seen a player like him. He's like 6'7" and skinny. He's fast but really stiff, and he's got crazy long arms for the position. I think I saw a tweet from Max Toscano, who does really good work writing up tight ends on his website. Good follow on Twitter. I think he compared him to Nosferatu in a tweet that made me chuckle because that's very accurate, just the way that he looks and moves. But he's just an awkward player. Go watch some highlights on him. He's fast in a straight line. He's got run after catch juice. He can block in space against like linebackers and tight ends and stuff. So I kind of see him as like a Jonnu Smith role, and even like the stuff he's good at, Jonnu Smith's good at. He just does it in a completely different way. So if he's good, I wouldn't be terribly surprised, but if he just completely sucks and his skill set just doesn't really work against NFL competition, because frankly, it didn't always work against Big Ten competition, that also wouldn't surprise me. But he's a fun player nonetheless, and why not take a dart throw on kind of a unique athlete like that in the 7th round? And then just a dart throw, very, very end of the draft here on a length, speed-based cornerback prospect. Non-combine invite that got himself drafted at his pro day there with the 30th pick in the 7th round. And then no undrafted players stood out for me on the Giants either. But grading the Giants draft is interesting because I obviously love everything they did, but I am going to be critical from a process standpoint on the Jackson Dart pick. At the end of the day, not the guy I would love to hitch my wagon to as the developmental QB of my future. I think if I had the freedom to do it, and obviously they didn't, they just were in such a terrible spot in a bad quarterback draft, knowing that these guys, kind of had to get a guy that they could sell ownership on, that they're going to develop and get a QB of the future. Because I don't think anybody's expecting this team to, be this dominant playoff team this year. They still needed to kind of work on the future while they're here and not completely just coach for their jobs this year. So I understand why they had to make the pick, but that's just not ideally who I would hitch my wagon to, and trading a pair of third-round picks to make it happen too. It's just like not my favorite thing. I think that takes an A+ draft and makes it an A-. I think that's fair. I would love to hear Giants fans' thoughts on the A- grade there, but I will say this. I am excited for the New York Giants. I think this roster has come a long way over the last couple of years. For a GM in Joe Shane that is like GMing for his job right now, he's done a phenomenal job building up what this roster looks like on paper in just a couple of years, and I think if Brian Daboll can do what he did in 2022 with Daniel Jones as his quarterback, I am actually legitimately excited to see what he can do with this roster with Russell Wilson and I suppose Jackson Dart if he's going to get on the field. I do think if Russ struggles, we will see Jackson Dart at some point in his rookie season, but it's going to be Russ for at least the first 6 weeks or so, I would think. But there you have it for the Giants and the NFC East. And that is going to do it. Definitely let me have it in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on my grades from this video. Ultimately, if I was critical of a player, I obviously hope I'm wrong. I'm just being honest about what I saw here heading into the draft. But as we head out, if you could, again, please take just a second to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch all of my draft grades videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Peace out.